My daughter's stepson got sick, so we brought him over for dinner. He asked, "In your house, is it allowed to eat?" My blood froze. At that exact moment, I received a message from my daughter. SOS. I stood up, went straight to their house, and what I found in the basement was devastating. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Raymond, and at 64 years old, I thought I'd seen enough of life's surprises. I was wrong. What happened that Thursday evening in November changed everything I thought I knew about my family. And it started with the most innocent question from a 7-year-old boy. Joshua had been my daughter Sarah's stepson for almost 3 years now, ever since she married Derek. The kid was quiet, maybe too quiet for a boy his age, but Derek always explained it away as shyness. "He's just adjusting," he'd say whenever I mentioned it. "Some kids take longer to warm up." That evening, Sarah had called to ask if Joshua could come to dinner. Derek was working late again, she said, and she didn't want the boy eating alone. I'd grown fond of these dinners with Joshua. The kid had this way of listening intently to everything I said, like he was storing up every word for later. I made his favorite, spaghetti and meatballs with extra cheese. Nothing fancy, but it always made him smile. When Sarah dropped him off, she seemed rushed, distracted. She gave Joshua a quick hug and whispered something in his ear that I couldn't quite catch. The boy nodded solemnly. "I'll pick him up around 8, she said, already backing toward her car. "Thanks, Dad. You're a lifesaver." Something in her voice struck me as odd, but before I could ask, she was gone. Joshua stood in my doorway, small for his age, wearing clothes that seemed a size too big. His dark hair was neatly combed, but there were shadows under his eyes that shouldn't have been there on a child's face. "Come on in, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "Dinner's almost ready." We sat at my kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd eaten thousands of meals with my late wife, Margaret. Joshua picked at his food, taking small, careful bites. I watched him, remembering how my own grandchildren used to attack their plates like they were afraid someone might take the food away. "Everything okay, Joshua? You're not eating much." He looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. "Mr. Raymond, can I ask you something?" "Of course, kiddo. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, twirling his fork in the spaghetti without taking a bite. "In your house, is it allowed to eat?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I set down my own fork, my appetite suddenly gone. "What do you mean, Joshua?" "I mean," he glanced toward the kitchen door as if checking to make sure we were alone. "Is it okay if I eat all of this, even if I'm not really hungry?" My chest tightened. In 42 years of being a father and grandfather, I'd never heard a child ask permission to eat food that was offered to them. "Joshua, honey, of course you can eat. You can eat as much or as little as you want. Are you hungry at home?" He nodded quickly, maybe too quickly. "Oh, yes, sir. Derek makes sure I eat. He says I need to earn it first, though, like doing chores and being good." The room felt suddenly cold. I kept my voice steady, gentle. "What kind of chores does Derek have you do?" "Cleaning, mostly. The basement gets really messy, and Derek says it's good for me to spend time down there. He says it teaches me to appreciate being upstairs." My hands began to shake. I clasped them together under the table. "How much time do you spend in the basement, Joshua?" "Depends on how good I've been. Sometimes just a few hours. Sometimes," he shrugged, as if it was normal. "Sometimes longer." Before I could process what he was telling me, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. I glanced at the screen and felt my blood run cold. Sarah. One word. SOS. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Sarah had never sent me an SOS message. Ever. Not in all her 36 years. She was the responsible one, the one who handled crises, not the one who created them. "Mr. Raymond, are you okay?" Joshua's small voice brought me back to the moment. I looked at him, really looked at him. The too big clothes, the careful way he ate, the shadows under his eyes, the way he kept glancing at the door. How had I missed it? How had we all missed it? "Joshua," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "I need to make a quick phone call. You keep eating, okay? Take as much as you want." I stepped into the living room and called Sarah, straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. My hands were shaking now as I typed back, "Where are you? What's wrong?" The response came immediately, "Can't talk. At home. Need help." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked back at Joshua, who was now eating more eagerly as if he'd been given permission he'd never had before. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed made me sick. I walked back to the kitchen, sat down across from Joshua, and tried to keep my voice normal. "Joshua, buddy, I'm going to drive you home a little early tonight, okay?" His face fell. "Did I do something wrong? I can go to the basement when I get home. I won't tell Derek about eating so much." The basement. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. "No, Joshua. You didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right, and you're not going to any basement tonight." I helped him into his jacket, my mind working furiously. As we walked to my car, Joshua slipped his small hand into mine. "Mr. Raymond, thank you for letting me eat." Those words nearly broke me. I squeezed his hand gently. "You never have to thank anyone for feeding you, Joshua. Ever." As we drove through the familiar streets toward Sarah's house, Joshua dozed in the passenger seat, probably the most relaxed I'd ever seen him. But my mind was spinning with questions and a growing dread. What was I going to find at my daughter's house? And why had it taken a 7-year-old's innocent question about permission to eat for me to realize that something was terribly, terribly wrong? The porch light was on when we pulled into their driveway, but something felt off. The house looked normal from the outside, but I could feel it in my bones. Whatever was happening behind that front door was going to change all of our lives forever. I carried a sleeping Joshua from the car, his small body surprisingly light in my arms. The boy didn't even stir, exhausted in a way that children shouldn't be. As I approached the front door, I noticed Sarah's car in the driveway, but Derek's truck was missing. That was strange. Sarah had said he was working late, but his construction company didn't usually run evening shifts. I rang the doorbell and waited. No answer. I rang again, then knocked. Finally, I heard footsteps, and Sarah opened the door. The sight of my daughter made my heart clench. Her usually bright eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. "Dad," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder, "you need to leave. Now. Take Joshua with you." "Sarah, what's going on? You sent me an SOS, and Joshua, he said some things tonight that have me worried." She looked down at her stepson in my arms, and I saw something break in her expression. "What kind of things?" "About earning his food, about spending time in the basement." "Sarah, what's happening in this house?" Her lip trembled. "Derek's at his brother's house tonight. He'll be back soon. You have to go before he gets here." "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's wrong." I shifted Joshua's weight and stepped past her into the house. "Where can I put him down?" "The couch," she said quickly. "But Dad, please, you don't understand. If Derek finds out I texted you..." I laid Joshua gently on the living room sofa and turned to face my daughter. The room looked normal enough. Family photos on the walls, toys scattered around, the usual clutter of a home with children. But there was something else, something I couldn't put my finger on, an atmosphere of fear that seemed to hang in the air like smoke. "Sarah, I need you to tell me the truth. Is Derek hurting Joshua?" She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture I remembered from when she was little and afraid. "Not hitting him, if that's what you mean. Derek would never... He's not violent like that." "Then what?" She looked toward the basement door, and I followed her gaze. It was closed, but I noticed there was a deadbolt lock on it, a deadbolt that could only be locked from the outside. "Sarah?" My voice was barely a whisper. "What's in the basement?" "It's where Joshua stays when he's been difficult. Derek says it's discipline, that kids these days don't learn respect without consequences." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them in for months. At first, it was just for an hour or two, when Joshua wouldn't eat his vegetables or talk back. Derek said his father used the same method with him. I stared at the deadbolt, feeling sick. "How long has this been going on?" "Since last Christmas, maybe a little before." Derek said Joshua was getting too comfortable, too spoiled, that he needed to learn boundaries. She was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. "I tried to argue with him, Dad, I really did. But Derek said I didn't understand boys, that I was too soft. He said his mother had made the same mistakes, and look how he turned out." "How he turned out?" I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. "Sarah, he locks a 7-year-old child in a basement, It's not. It's finished down there. There's a bed and books and—" She stopped, hearing how hollow her justification sounded. "Show me." "Dad, no, I can't. If Derek finds out—" "Sarah, look at me." I took her hands in mine. They were shaking. "Is this the life you want for Joshua? Is this what you think love looks like?" She sobbed then, the sound breaking my heart. "I don't know what to think anymore. Derek says I'm too emotional, that I can't see what's best for Joshua. He says the boy needs a firm hand, that he's been damaged by his real father leaving. Where's his real father now? Dead. Car accident when Joshua was 4. That's how I met Joshua, actually. I was his grief counselor at the community center." She wiped her eyes. "He was such a sweet little boy. So quiet, so sad. I just wanted to help him." "And you did help him. You gave him a home, a mother's love. But this, Sarah, this isn't helping him. This is destroying him." Ha ha. I walked to the basement door and reached for the deadbolt. It slid back easily, and I heard Sarah gasp behind me. "Dad, please don't. Derek will know someone was down there." But I was already starting down the wooden steps. The basement was finished, just as Sarah had said. But it was also something else entirely. It was a prison. The bed was little more than a cot with a thin blanket. There was a single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling, no windows, and the air was stale and cold. A small stack of children's books sat on a makeshift table made from a cardboard box. In the corner, I saw a bucket, and my stomach turned as I realized what it was for. On the walls, written in what looked like a child's handwriting, were dozens of lines. "I will be good. I will be good. I will be good." Over and over, covering nearly every surface within reach. I heard Sarah behind me on the stairs. "Oh God," she whispered. I didn't know about the writing." "How long does he stay down here, Sarah? Tell me the truth." "Sometimes overnight. Derek says it gives Joshua time to think about his behavior." I turned to face her, and I know my expression must have been terrible because she stepped back. "Sarah, this is child abuse. This is exactly the kind of thing that destroys children for life." "But Derek said—" "I don't care what Derek said," my voice echoed in the small space. "This is torture, Sarah. Look around you." "This is torture." She looked, really looked, and I watched as the full reality of what had been happening hit her. Her knees gave out, and she sat heavily on the bottom step. "What have I done?" she whispered. "What have I let happen to him?" I climbed back up the stairs and found my phone. "I'm calling the police." "No!" Sarah scrambled up after me. "Dad, you can't. Derek he'll fight for custody. He'll say I'm an unfit mother. He has lawyers, Dad, his construction business, all those connections. What if they don't believe us? What if they think I'm just as guilty?" I stopped dialing. She was right to be scared. Derek had money, influence, a clean public reputation. And Sarah had been living in this house, allowing this to happen. The legal system might not see the distinction between abuse and enabling. "Then, what do you suggest we do?" She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she looked toward the living room where Joshua was still sleeping peacefully on the couch. "We get him out of here tonight, before Derek comes home." "And then what?" "I don't know. I just know that I can't let Derek put him back in that basement. Not ever again." I looked at my daughter, seeing for the first time in months a glimpse of the strong woman I'd raised. "Are you ready to leave him? To leave Derek?" She nodded, more certain than she'd sounded all evening. "I should have left months ago. I was just so afraid, and Derek was so good at making me think I was wrong about everything. But seeing that basement through your eyes—" "God, Dad, what kind of person have I become?" "You've become someone who was manipulated and scared, but that ends tonight." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Pack whatever you and Joshua need. We're getting both of you out of here." As Sarah hurried upstairs to gather their things, I sat beside Joshua on the couch. He stirred slightly, and his eyes opened. "Mr. Raymond, are we home?" I smoothed his hair gently. "Not yet, buddy, but we're going somewhere safe, somewhere you'll never have to worry about basements again." He sat up, suddenly alert. "Is Derek coming back?" The fear in his voice broke my heart all over again. "Not tonight, Joshua. Tonight, you're staying with me." For the first time since I'd known him, I saw Joshua smile. Really smile. "Can I have breakfast tomorrow, even if I'm not hungry?" You can have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks whenever you want them. That's what families do. As we waited for Sarah to pack, I held that little boy close and made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whatever I had to do, Derek would never hurt him again. We made it to my house just after 10 o'clock that night. Sarah carried 2 hastily packed suitcases, while I carried Joshua, who had fallen back asleep in the car. The boy felt so fragile in my arms, like he might break if I held him too tightly. As I tucked him into the guest bed that had once belonged to Sarah when she was his age, I noticed how he instinctively curled into a tight ball, even in sleep. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching. He always sleeps like that now. Derek said it was normal, that all kids go through phases. Derek said a lot of things that weren't true, I replied, pulling the covers up to Joshua's chin. The boy stirred slightly and smiled in his sleep. We went downstairs to the kitchen, and I made coffee while Sarah sat at the table, staring at her phone. She looked exhausted, but there was something different about her now, a resolution that hadn't been there in months. "He's been texting," she said, holding up her phone. 6 messages in the last 20 minutes. What's he saying? The usual. That I'm overreacting, that I need to come home so we can talk like adults. Then it got angrier. She showed me the screen. Now he's saying, if I don't bring Joshua back by morning, he's calling his lawyer. I sat down across from her. Sarah, I need you to understand something. This isn't going to be easy. Derek's going to fight this. He's going to try to make you think you're the problem, that you're being hysterical. I know. Her voice was steady. But I keep thinking about those words on the basement wall. I will be good. I upped. How many times did he make Joshua write that? How many nights did that little boy go to sleep thinking he was bad, that he deserved to be locked away? Too many. I reached across and took her hand. But that's over now. At 11:30, headlights swept across the living room window. We both froze. A truck door slammed and heavy footsteps approached the front door. "He found us," Sarah whispered. The pounding started before the doorbell, loud, aggressive, demanding. "Sarah, I know you're in there. Open the door right now." "Stay here," I told her, but she shook her head. "No, Dad, I need to face him. I need to do this." Derek's pounding grew more insistent. "Sarah, you're being ridiculous. Bring Joshua home. He needs his routine." I opened the door with Sarah beside me. Derek stood on my porch, still wearing his work clothes, his face red with anger. He was a big man, probably 6'3", and built like the construction worker he was. I'd always felt small next to him, but tonight something had changed. Tonight, I wasn't intimidated. "Derek," I kept my voice calm. "It's late. Don't you start with me, old man." He pushed past me into the house. "Sarah, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just take Joshua and disappear." "I can when you've been abusing him," Sarah said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. Derek's laugh was harsh. "Abusing him? I've been trying to turn that kid into a man." Something his real father never had the chance to do. By locking him in a basement? I stepped closer to Derek. By making him earn the right to eat? "You don't know what you're talking about." Derek's eyes were cold. "That boy was spoiled rotten when Sarah and I got together. No discipline, no respect. His mother let him get away with everything. His mother died when he was 3, Derek. He was a grieving child who needed love, not punishment. Love doesn't teach character. My father used the same methods with me, and I turned out fine." "Did you?" Sarah's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Is this what fine looks like? Terrorizing a 7-year-old boy?" Derek turned on her, and I saw the rage in his face that Sarah had probably been living with for months. "You think you know better than me? You think your soft approach was working? The kid was weak, Sarah, crying all the time, afraid of his own shadow. He was crying because you were hurting him. I never laid a hand on him. You didn't have to." I moved between Derek and Sarah. Emotional abuse is still abuse. Isolation is still torture. Derek's fists clenched. For a moment I thought he might actually hit me. Instead, he laughed again. "You're both pathetic. Fine, keep the kid tonight. But I'm calling my lawyer first thing in the morning. I have parental rights, and I'll exercise them." "Actually, you don't." Sarah's voice was quiet but certain. "I checked before we left. You never formally adopted Joshua. You have no legal rights to him at all." Derek's face went white. "You can't be serious." When we got married, you said adoption was just paperwork, that it didn't matter because we were a family, remember? You said blood didn't matter, that love was enough. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. But you never loved him, did you? You just wanted to control him. Sarah, you're making a huge mistake. Without me, how are you going to support him? Your part-time counseling job barely pays for groceries. You need me. No, I don't. I never did. I just thought I did because you made me believe I was helpless. Derek looked around my living room and I could see him calculating, trying to find another angle of attack. Fine. But what about us? Our marriage? 3 years, Sarah? Are you really going to throw that away over this? You threw it away the first time you locked a child in our basement. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek stared at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. You've changed. Yes, I have. I've remembered who I used to be before I met you. Derek's expression shifted from anger to something more dangerous. Desperation. Sarah, think about what you're doing. If you leave me, if you try to destroy my reputation with these lies, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are. I have pictures of that basement, Sarah. Pictures that show it was finished, comfortable. I can make it look like you were the one who wanted Joshua down there. My blood ran cold. He was threatening to frame my daughter. You took pictures? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Insurance, Derek said with a cruel smile. I always document my methods, just in case someone tried to twist them into something they weren't. Get out. The words came from deep in my chest, carrying decades of protective instinct. Get out of my house right now. This isn't over, Derek said, but he was backing toward the door. I'll be back with a court order, and next time, I won't be so reasonable. After he left, Sarah collapsed into a chair, shaking. Dad, what if he's serious? What if he tries to make it look like I was part of it? He won't get the chance. I was already reaching for my phone. I'm calling the police right now. But the picture, Sarah, any decent investigator will be able to tell the difference between a finished basement and a prison cell. Those words Joshua wrote on the walls, the bucket in the corner, the deadbolt lock. Derek can't explain those away with photographs. As I dialed 911, I heard a small voice from the stairs. Mr. Raymond? Joshua stood at the bottom of the steps in the pajamas Sarah had packed for him, rubbing his eyes. I heard shouting, Is Derek here? Sarah went to him immediately, kneeling down to his level. Derek was here, but he's gone now. You're safe. Is he coming back? I finished my call to the police and knelt down beside Sarah. Joshua, I need you to be very brave for me. Some police officers are going to come and talk to us, and they might ask you some questions about Derek and the basement. Can you tell them the truth about what happened there? Joshua looked between Sarah and me, his small face serious beyond his years. Will you stay with me while I talk to them? Every minute, Sarah promised. And afterward, do I have to go back? I looked at this brave little boy who had endured so much, and I made him the most important promise of my life. No, Joshua, you never have to go back there again. The police arrived 20 minutes later, and as they took our statements, I watched Joshua describe his time in the basement with a clarity that broke my heart. He drew pictures of the room, showed them how he had to sit on the stairs when he needed to use the bathroom, explained how Derek would test him before letting him come upstairs. The officers were gentle but thorough. They photographed the bruises on Joshua's arms from where Derek had grabbed him, documented the timeline of abuse, and took detailed notes about the basement prison. When they left, they took Derek's threats seriously and assured us that someone would be stationed outside the house for the rest of the night. As dawn broke, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching Joshua and Sarah sleep peacefully on the living room sofa. For the first time in months, neither of them looked afraid. Derek thought he held all the cards, but he was wrong. The truth was stronger than his threats. Love was more powerful than his manipulation, and this family was done being victims. The next morning brought chaos in the form of Derek's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Wells, who showed up at my door with a folder full of papers and a confidence that made my stomach turn. Mr. Hartwell, she said, not waiting for an invitation to enter, I represent Derek Morrison. I think we need to discuss this situation before it gets out of hand. The only thing getting out of hand is your client's abuse of a child, I replied, but I let her in. Sarah was in the kitchen making breakfast for Joshua, trying to maintain some normalcy in the chaos. Ms. Wells set her briefcase on my coffee table and pulled out several documents. My client is prepared to offer a very reasonable settlement. Mrs. Morrison returns home with the child, all charges are dropped, and everyone moves forward as a family. Settlement? Sarah appeared in the doorway, Joshua hiding behind her legs. He thinks this is something he can buy his way out of. Mrs. Morrison, your husband has provided me with extensive documentation of the child's behavioral issues, including incidents of aggression, property destruction, and defiance. The basement accommodation was a therapeutic intervention recommended by child psychologists. I almost laughed. Therapeutic intervention? Show me one licensed therapist who recommends locking children in basements. Ms. Wells pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. It showed Derek's basement, but it looked different. The harsh overhead bulb was replaced with soft lighting. There was a colorful rug on the floor, and toys were scattered around. As you can see, this was hardly a prison cell. It was a quiet space where Joshua could calm down when his emotions became overwhelming. Sarah stared at the photo. That's not how it looked when we left. Derek staged this. Can you prove that? Ms. Wells asked smoothly. Before Sarah could answer, I heard Joshua's small voice from behind her. That's not my basement. Ms. Wells looked down at him with practiced sympathy. Hello, Joshua. I know this is confusing, but sometimes when we're upset, we remember things differently than they really happened. I drew pictures for the police, Joshua said firmly. My basement didn't have toys. Children's memories can be unreliable, Ms. Wells continued, but Joshua stepped out from behind Sarah. I wrote on the walls, I will be good. Derek made me write it 100 times every time I cried. The lawyer's confidence flickered for just a moment. Well, we'll let the courts determine the facts. Mr. Morrison is filing for emergency custody based on parental alienation and false allegations. He has no parental rights, Sarah said. He never adopted Joshua. Actually, he does. Ms. Wells pulled out another document. Under state law, a step-parent who has lived with and supported a child for more than 2 years can claim custodial rights, especially when the biological parent is deemed unfit. My heart sank. I'd been hoping Derek's lack of formal adoption would protect us, but if he had lawyers working around that. Unfit? Sarah's voice was dangerous. I'm unfit? You allowed this alleged abuse to continue for months. You participated in what you now claim was torture. Either you're lying about the abuse, or you're an unfit mother who failed to protect her child. Which is it? The trap was elegant and cruel. Either Sarah was a liar or a negligent mother. Either way, Derek could use it against her. There's a third option, I said. She was a victim of psychological manipulation by an abuser. Prove it, Ms. Wells challenged. That's when our own lawyer arrived. I'd called James Fletcher as soon as the police left, and he'd agreed to take the case immediately. James had been my attorney for 20 years, handling everything from my business contracts to my wife's estate. He was quiet, methodical, and brilliant. Patricia, he said, nodding to Derek's lawyer as he entered, I see you're getting an early start. James, I didn't know you were representing in this matter. Emergency custody motions require immediate response. He set his own briefcase down and pulled out a thick folder. I've spent the morning documenting some very interesting patterns in your client's behavior. Ms. Wells's confident demeanor wavered slightly. What kind of patterns? Complaints filed with Child Protective Services in his previous relationships. 3 different women, 3 different children, all describing similar isolation techniques. James opened his folder and spread out several documents. Shall we discuss Melissa Crawford? Or perhaps Diana Torres? Both women who had stepchildren in Derek Morrison's care, both women who reported concerning disciplinary methods before leaving the relationships. The room went silent. I looked at Sarah, who had gone pale. Those cases were investigated and dismissed, Ms. Wells said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. Dismissed due to lack of physical evidence and the women's reluctance to pursue charges after being threatened with custody battles. Sound familiar? I watched as the pieces fell into place in Sarah's mind. I wasn't the first. No, James said gently. You weren't. And Derek's pattern of selecting single mothers with vulnerable children, gaining their trust, then systematically isolating and controlling both the mother and child, has been remarkably consistent. Ms. Wells was rifling through her papers frantically. These are sealed juvenile records? You can't use them? Actually, I can. When there's a pattern of child abuse, previous investigations become relevant to current custody determinations. And there's more. James pulled out another document. Derek Morrison's own therapy records from when he was a child. How did you get those? Ms. Wells demanded. Public records request. Seems Derek spent several years in foster care after being removed from his own father's custody for, let me check, physical and emotional abuse, including prolonged isolation as punishment. The irony was devastating. Derek had become the father he'd been rescued from. This doesn't change anything, Ms. Wells said, but she was packing up her papers. My client still intends to pursue custody. Let him try, James said calmly, but he might want to consider the criminal charges that are being filed this afternoon. Child abuse, child endangerment, terroristic threats, and harassment. Oh, and the IRS is very interested in the cash payments he's been receiving from some of his construction clients. Ms. Wells stopped packing. What cash payments? James smiled. The ones he forgot to report as income. Amazing what people remember when they're trying to protect children. After the lawyers left, I sat with Sarah and Joshua in my living room, trying to process everything we'd learned. 3 other children, Sarah said quietly. How many kids did he hurt before Joshua? It doesn't matter now, I told her. What matters is that he can't hurt any more children. Joshua was playing with blocks on the floor, but I could tell he was listening to every word. Mr. Raymond? Are the other kids okay now? I think they are, buddy, and you're going to be okay too. Will Derek go to jail? I looked at James, who nodded slightly. Yes, Joshua. Derek is going to jail for what he did to you. Good, Joshua said matter-of-factly, then went back to his blocks. That afternoon, we watched from my living room window as police cars surrounded Derek's construction site. The local news reported that Derek Morrison, 38, had been arrested on multiple charges of child abuse and tax evasion. Sarah cried when she saw him in handcuffs on the television, but they weren't tears of sadness. It's really over, she whispered. Yes, I said, putting my arm around her. It's really over. But even as I said it, I knew the real work was just beginning. Joshua would need therapy, Sarah would need to rebuild her confidence, and we'd all need to learn how to be a family again. That evening, as I tucked Joshua into bed, he looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. Mr. Raymond, can I stay here forever? As long as you want to, buddy, as long as you want to. He smiled then, the first completely unguarded smile I'd ever seen from him. I love you, Grandpa. The word hit me like a physical force. Grandpa. In all the chaos and fear and anger of the past day, I hadn't realized that's what I'd become to him. Not just Sarah's father, not just the man who'd rescued him, but family. I love you too, Joshua, more than you'll ever know. 2 months had passed since Derek's arrest, and life had settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Joshua was enrolled in a new school closer to my house. Sarah had found a full-time position at a family counseling center, and the 3 of us were learning what normal felt like. But just when I thought the worst was behind us, the past came knocking again. It was a Tuesday afternoon in January when James Fletcher called with news that made my blood run cold. Raymond, we have a problem. Derek's been released on bail. I was sitting in my kitchen watching Joshua build an elaborate Lego castle on the table. The boy looked up at me with concern when he heard the change in my voice. Released? How is that possible? His family posted bond, $250,000. His uncle owns half the commercial real estate in the county, apparently. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar knot of fear return to my stomach. What does this mean for us? He's not allowed to contact you or come within 500 feet of Joshua. But Raymond, bail doesn't mean the charges are dropped. It just means he's free while awaiting trial. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone, trying to figure out how to tell Sarah and Joshua. Before I could decide, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. She was probably in her 40s, with sandy blonde hair and tired eyes. She looked nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "Can I help you?" I called through the door. "Are you Raymond Hartwell? My name is Melissa Crawford. I think we need to talk about Derek Morrison." Melissa, the name James had mentioned, one of Derek's previous victims. I opened the door cautiously. "I know this is strange," she said quickly, "but when I saw the news about his arrest, I had to come. Is Joshua okay?" I let her in, and she sat across from me in my living room, her hands shaking as she accepted a cup of coffee. "Joshua's doing better," I said, "but Derek was released on bail yesterday." Her face went white. Oh God, I was afraid of that. His family has money, connections. They got him out when I pressed charges too. "What happened with your case?" Melissa stared into her coffee cup. "My son was 6 when I married Derek. Just like Joshua, he was quiet, sensitive. Derek said he needed discipline, structure. At first, it seemed reasonable. Earlier bedtimes, limited TV time. But then it escalated. The basement," she nodded. "Derek called it reflection time. Sometimes my son would be down there for 12 hours. I was working 2 jobs trying to keep us afloat, and Derek convinced me I was too tired to see things clearly. He said I was too emotional to make good parenting decisions. The familiar pattern made me sick." "What made you finally leave?" "My son stopped talking. Completely. For 3 weeks he didn't say a single word. When I took him to a doctor, she asked about his home life, and everything came spilling out." Melissa's voice broke. "I had let my child suffer because I was too afraid and too manipulated to see what was right in front of me. You got out. That's what matters. But Derek didn't face consequences. His lawyers painted me as an unstable single mother making up stories for attention. The case was dismissed, and Derek walked away free to find his next victim." I leaned forward. "Which was Sarah. And now there will be another one after her, and another one after that, unless we stop him." Before I could respond, Joshua appeared in the doorway. He'd been upstairs doing homework, but something about Melissa's voice must have drawn his attention. "Mr. Raymond? Who is this lady?" Melissa looked at Joshua, and I saw recognition and pain flash across her face. "Hello, sweetheart, I'm Melissa. I have a little boy about your age." Joshua stepped closer, studying her with those serious eyes. "Did Derek hurt your little boy too?" The directness of the question stunned Melissa. She nodded, unable to speak. Joshua walked over and climbed onto the couch beside her. "It's okay. Derek can't hurt us anymore. Mr. Raymond called the police and they put Derek in jail. But he's out now," Melissa whispered. "Then we'll put him back," Joshua said, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. That evening, after Joshua was in bed, Sarah, Melissa, and I sat around my kitchen table, planning what felt like a war council. "There are others," Melissa told us. "I've been in contact with 2 more women since Derek's arrest, Diana Torres and Jennifer Walsh. All of us have similar stories. All of us have children who suffered." "Will they testify?" Sarah asked. "They're scared. Derek's family has money, and they've all been threatened before. But seeing Joshua have the courage to speak up, it's inspiring them." I thought about the little boy upstairs, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, and felt something harden in my chest. What do you need from us? Strength in numbers. If we all stand together, tell our stories together, it becomes harder for Derek's lawyers to dismiss us as hysterical women making things up. Over the next week, I watched Sarah transform. The scared, uncertain woman who had lived in Derek's shadow was gone, replaced by someone fierce and determined. We coordinated with the other mothers, shared strategies for dealing with trauma, and helped prepare their children for the possibility of testifying. Diana Torres came to our house on Saturday. Her daughter, now 12, had been 9 when Derek had terrorized her. The girl was quiet but articulate as she described her experiences. "He used to make me stand in the corner for hours," she told Joshua. "He said it was teaching me patience, but really it was just mean." Joshua nodded seriously. "He made me write 'I will be good' on the walls, 100 times every day." "I had to write lines too," Diana's daughter said, "about being grateful for his discipline." I watched these children, survivors of the same man's cruelty, finding strength in each other's stories. It was heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. Jennifer Walsh arrived with her son that afternoon. He was 10 now, but had been 7 when Derek had controlled his life. The boy was more withdrawn than the others, but when Joshua showed him the Lego castle he'd built, something shifted. "Derek never let me play with toys during the day," Jennifer's son said quietly. "He said they were for after chores and good behavior." "You can play with my Legos anytime you want," Joshua offered. "Mr. Raymond says, toys are for whenever we feel like playing." That's when Jennifer broke down, crying. Since Derek, he's never played with other children's toys. He always asks permission first." The pattern was so clear, so consistent, that even Derek's high-powered lawyers would have trouble explaining it away. But I knew they would try. Monday morning brought devastating news. James called before breakfast, his voice grim. "Derek's legal team is going nuclear. They're claiming all 4 women conspired to frame him, that this is some kind of vendetta by bitter ex-girlfriends. But the evidence, they're saying the evidence was manufactured, that the children were coached, that the basement was staged to look worse than it was. They've hired expert witnesses who will testify that isolated discipline is a legitimate parenting technique." My heart sank. Can they do that? They can try, and with Derek's family's money behind them, they can afford the best experts money can buy. That afternoon, Derek's lawyer, Patricia Wells, held a press conference. I watched it on the local news with growing horror as she painted Derek as a victim of a coordinated campaign by vindictive women. "My client is a hard-working man who tried to provide structure and guidance to children from broken homes," she said into the camera. "These allegations are the result of a conspiracy by women who couldn't handle his success or his unwillingness to tolerate their poor parenting." The reporter asked about the basement evidence, and Wells smiled coldly. That basement was a finished recreation room where children could play quietly when they were upset. The so-called prison narrative was created by mothers looking for someone to blame for their own failures. I turned off the TV, feeling sick. Derek's team was systematically destroying the credibility of every woman who had dared to speak against him. That night, Joshua found me sitting on my back porch, staring up at the stars. "Mr. Raymond, are you worried about Derek?" I looked down at this brave little boy who had been through so much. "A little bit, buddy." "Me too. But you know what?" "What's that?" "I'm not scared anymore. Even if Derek tries to hurt me again, I know you and Mom will protect me, and I know I'm not bad like Derek said I was." His words hit me like a revelation. Win or lose in court, Joshua was already free. Derek's power over him was broken. "You're right, Joshua. You're absolutely right. Besides," he said, settling down beside me on the porch steps, "bad people can't win forever. That's what you taught me." As I sat there with my grandson under the stars, I realized he was right about something else too. This wasn't just about putting Derek in prison anymore. This was about making sure that what happened to Joshua and to all those other children never happened again. Derek thought his money and lawyers made him untouchable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in March. The courthouse was packed with reporters, family members, and supporters from both sides. Derek sat at the defendant's table in an expensive suit, looking every inch the respectable businessman his lawyers wanted the jury to see. But I wasn't looking at him. I was watching the 4 mothers, Sarah, Melissa, Diana, and Jennifer, sitting in the front row, united in their determination to protect their children. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. James had done his homework, presenting not just the evidence from Joshua's case, but the pattern of abuse across multiple relationships. The basement photographs, the children's drawings, the medical records documenting anxiety and trauma, piece by piece, they built an undeniable picture of systematic child abuse. When it came time for the children to testify, the judge allowed them to do so via closed-circuit television from a separate room. I watched Joshua on the monitor, sitting straight in his chair, answering questions with a clarity that belied his 8 years. "Did Derek ever lock you in the basement?" the prosecutor asked gently. "Yes, ma'am, lots of times." "How long would you stay there?" "Sometimes just a few hours if I forgot to say please or thank you. sometimes all night if I cried or asked for food when it wasn't mealtime. How did that make you feel? Joshua thought for a moment. Scared and lonely, and like I was a bad person who didn't deserve to be upstairs with the family. Derek's defense team tried to shake the children's testimony, suggesting they had been coached or that their memories were unreliable. But the consistency across all 4 children's stories was impossible to dismiss. The other children were equally compelling. Diana's daughter described being forced to stand motionless for hours as punishment for minor infractions. Jennifer's son talked about the fear he felt every time Derek looked at him. Each story built upon the others, creating an overwhelming portrait of a man who systematically terrorized children. When Derek took the stand in his own defense, I watched the jury's faces carefully. His lawyers had coached him well. He appeared calm, reasonable, even sympathetic. "I love those children like they were my own," he said, looking directly at the jury. "Everything I did was to help them become better people. Sometimes love means setting boundaries." "Did you ever lock any child in a basement?" his lawyer asked. "I provided quiet spaces for children to calm down when they were overwhelmed. The basement was finished, comfortable, with books and activities. It was no different from sending a child to their room." "Did you ever deny children food?" "I established meal times and routines. Structure is important for children from chaotic backgrounds." It was a masterful performance, and I saw some jurors nodding. Derek's lawyers had turned abuse into discipline, torture into tough love. But then came cross-examination, and James Fletcher was relentless. "Mr. Morrison, you testified that you provided quiet spaces for the children. Was there a lock on the basement door?" "For safety reasons, yes." "Safety for whom? The child locked inside? Or for you to ensure they couldn't escape?" Derek's composure began to crack. "Children need boundaries. Mr. Morrison, did you install a bucket in this quiet space for the children to use as a bathroom?" "Sometimes children were there during meal preparation, or other times when supervision upstairs wasn't possible." "So, you're admitting you locked children in a basement for extended periods without access to proper bathroom facilities?" That's not how I would characterize it." James pulled out the photographs of the basement walls, covered in Joshua's writing. "Did you require the children to write lines as punishment?" "Writing exercises can be therapeutic." 100 times. "I will be good." "Do you consider that therapeutic, Mr. Morrison, or psychological torture?" Derek's mask finally slipped. Those children were out of control. Their mothers were too weak to discipline them properly. Someone had to teach them respect. The courtroom erupted. Derek's lawyers tried to calm him down, but the damage was done. The jury had seen the real Derek Morrison, not the loving stepfather, but the controlling abuser who saw children as problems to be solved rather than people to be loved. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and delivered the verdict: guilty on all counts of child abuse, child endangerment, and terroristic threats. Derek's face went ashen as the judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he looked directly at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he mouthed. But it was. Finally, it was. Outside the courthouse, the 4 mothers hugged each other and cried. Their children, who had shown such incredible courage, were finally free to be children again. 6 months later, I stood in the backyard of my house watching Joshua play with his friends from school. Sarah had moved in permanently, and we'd converted the garage into a small apartment for her. The arrangement worked perfectly. Joshua had stability, Sarah had support, and I had the family I'd never expected to have at 65. Joshua was different now. The quiet, fearful child who had asked permission to eat was gone, replaced by a boy who laughed loudly, played with abandon, and never hesitated to ask for what he needed. He'd started calling me Grandpa officially after the trial, and the word still made my heart swell every time I heard it. "Grandpa," he called from the swing set, "watch me go really high." I watched him pump his legs, launching himself toward the sky with pure joy. 6 months ago, Derek had tried to break this child's spirit. Now Joshua soared without fear. Sarah joined me on the back porch with 2 cups of coffee. She looked healthier than she had in years. The stress lines around her eyes had faded, and she'd started smiling again. "I got a call from Melissa today," she said. "Her son made honor roll this semester." "That's wonderful. All 4 of the kids are doing well. Diana's daughter joined the school theater group. Jennifer's son started playing soccer. It's like they're all becoming who they were meant to be before Derek damaged them." I thought about that. Maybe that's the real victory. Not just that Derek is in prison, but that the children are free to heal. That evening, as I tucked Joshua into bed, he looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that were now more often filled with mischief than fear. "Grandpa, I had a dream about Derek last night." My heart skipped. Was it a scary dream? No. He was small, like really tiny, and I was big, and I told him he couldn't hurt kids anymore because good people would always protect them. That sounds like a very smart dream. "Do you think Derek will ever get out of prison?" I considered my answer carefully. "Someday he might, but by then you'll be grown up and strong, and more importantly, people know who he really is now. He can never trick another family the way he tricked us." Joshua nodded, satisfied with that answer. "Grandpa?" "Yes, buddy?" "Thank you for saving me." I kissed his forehead, my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me." As I turned off his light and headed downstairs, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. A year ago, I was a lonely widower marking time until death. Now I was a grandfather with purpose, a father figure to a healing daughter, and a guardian to a child who had taught me that courage comes in the smallest packages. In the living room, Sarah was grading papers from her counseling practice. She'd specialized in helping families recover from abuse, using her own experience to guide others through their healing. "Any interesting cases?" I asked. "A mother with twins who was married to a man who sounds exactly like Derek. Same pattern. Isolation, control, psychological manipulation. But she's getting out early before the damage goes too deep. Because she recognized the signs? Because she heard our story. The prosecutor shared it at a conference, and it's been making the rounds in social services. Other families are escaping before it's too late." I sat down beside her, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Derek had tried to destroy us, but instead his exposure was saving other families. Later that night, I walked through my house, checking locks and turning off lights, a routine that had become sacred to me. In Joshua's room, I saw him sleeping peacefully, sprawled across his bed with picture books scattered around him. No more fetal position, no more fear-based dreams. In the kitchen, I found a drawing Joshua had made at school earlier that day. It showed our family, him, Sarah, and me, standing in front of a house with the word "safe" written in crayon above the door. That simple word captured everything we'd fought for and won: safety, security, the right to exist without fear. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text message from James Fletcher. Derek's appeal was denied. The conviction stands. I smiled and deleted the message. Derek Morrison was exactly where he belonged, and we were exactly where we belonged. I'd started this journey as a grandfather trying to protect his family. I was ending it as a man who had helped save 4 children and given them back their childhoods. At 65, I discovered that it's never too late to become a hero, especially when the people you love are counting on you. Joshua was right about something else, too. Bad people can't win forever. Sometimes love and courage and the simple act of believing children when they ask for help is enough to defeat the darkness. As I turned off the last light and headed upstairs, I heard Joshua talking in his sleep. "Thank you for the food, Grandpa. I love you too." Even in dreams, he was safe now, and that made every difficult moment of the past year worth it.